David, how long have you been in this business?
Hello, everyone. Dan just asked me this, David Moore with Equity Advantage, and Dan, our presenter today, just asked how long I've been in the business, and 30 years, Dan. So I like to say I started off with a lot more hair on my head, but I'm still here, and this battle that you're going to talk about comes up every few years. I remember the gentleman that got me into, I can blame him for my existence in this business, but he was telling us, in 90, when we were getting ready to start the company, it's like, okay, the one thing you got to be aware of is they come after you every few years, try to do a pen stroke away from extermination. So I hate to say that 30 years later, here I am, Dan, with you sitting here talking about how we're going to keep this same thing in place. But for those of you out there, we've got about 90 of you out online right now. I don't want to waste a bunch of your time, so we'll get started. This is David Moore with Equity Advantage, and today's presentation webinar is going to be presented by Dan Wagner, Inland Private Capital Senior Vice President of Government Affairs. And we're blessed to have Dan presenting today on behalf of the Inland Company. And he's going to give us some great information. We will be providing updates as we get them. But Dan, I'd like to have you get started, and you can tell us a little bit about Inland, go through the presentation. And at the end, we're going to try to keep this contained right about an hour, but we will be addressing questions given time at the end. So for everyone out there, if you've got questions, there's on that menu, a little housekeeping here on the menu on the right side of the screen, there's this drawdown that says questions. You can type in questions, and we'll be discussing those at the end of the day today. If we don't get to your question, we will be replying via email as well, too. So if you are in a situation where you're needing continuing education and we're able to provide it for you, each state's different, you can reach out to C Moore, that is C Moore, M-O-O-R-E, at 1031exchange.com. Celia will be getting credit hour out for people that we can provide it for. So Dan, let's kick it off, and thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing what you've got to tell us.
Well, David, thank you for having me today. And I got to tell you, Celia is terrific. We appreciate you guys so much working together. It's good to be in your foxhole and have you in my foxhole. So I appreciate it. We're all, and ultimately, we're in this together, right? So I'm coming at you live from the world headquarters of the Inland Real Estate Group of Companies here in Oak Brook, Illinois. And Chicago has been socked with lots of snow, and it looks like behind you, David, you got some snow as well. So we're
yes, we do.
We're in the same boat. Well, thanks for having me. I love talking about. It's kind of like Groundhog Day with the 1031, like you talked about. It seems like the moment that you think it's all taken care of and fine, you go back and relive experiences of having to defend it again. So I'll just highlight to you first. I'm honored to work for the Inland Real Estate Group of Companies. And the Inland Real Estate Group was founded by these four teachers. Dan Goodwin is in the middle in a gray suit. His grandmother was homeless, comes from nothing. Bob Parks is to the left of him, and that's another one of the founding teachers. His dad was a janitor. Bob Baum in the red tie. His dad went to gas stations and sold windshield wiper blades and stuff like that. And then Joe Cassens in the bow tie, his dad was a barber. So again, these guys came from nothing. They were middle school teachers, and they decided in the summer, because they were making $5,500 a year, they said, we got to make more money for our family. So they got other Chicago public school teachers to come together, and they gave them money to invest. They started investing in real estate, did really well. And they did so well that they left teaching, and they grew Inland. And so when they grew Inland, and been in business for over 50 plus years, and we are a really big company. We have 1,100 employees, and besides the securities division that you're probably mostly aware of, we have a development company that at any one time has $250 million in the ground. We have another institutional capital partner company that deals with pension funds for investing with grocery acre shopping centers. We have a mortgage company. Interestingly enough, not on here is our bank. We just in the bank we have a home mortgage company that went from 600 million to $1 billion this year. So that's been a good growth for us there. And we have a PACE bond program as well that provides for renovations that are green energy efficient initiatives. So lots of different companies. But one of the things I wanted to get back to, these teachers, they created everything in the old days through limited partnerships. And at one point in time, we got up to 42,000 apartments in Chicago. We're the largest landlord of Chicago. And the tax laws changed, as you probably are aware. And when the tax laws changed in the 80s, some of the changes, the pass-through for limited partnerships was deleted. And so you had a variety of people who were underwater in some of their investments with us. Well, these guys would not let their fellow teachers and friends and relatives, have any losses. So they went and put all their money back in the company, and they went to Walmart and they said, hey, Walmart, can we do sale leasebacks with you? Walmart never really did it before. They said, sure. Inland then became the largest landlord of Walmart. At the same time, they went to Treasury and they said, can we 1031 exchange these people that are underwater into fractional share interests of Walmart's? And they said, well, we haven't really had anybody do anything like that before. You guys are saving these people. That's a really big deal. Sure, go ahead and do it. So it's kind of like it's a wonderful life story. All these people just were astounded that they were saved, and a lot of folks in the industry got Mr. Goodwin thinking, and they created the non-traded REIT industry. We're one of the founding members of the IPA. Then throughout our tenure, they started working with TICS, and you guys might remember Patricia Del Rosso. She created the Tenant and Common Association, which ended up turning into a DISA. But so the 1031 history with Inland's a really big deal. And one of the things of what I do, or what my existence is about, is I'm the Senior Vice President of Government Relations. So Mr. Goodwin identified that this happening, this tax law change in Washington, we don't ever want to have that happen without being aware of what's going on in Washington. So they kind of created my position, and so I'm kind of the canary in the coal mine for Inland. I make sure to let everybody know what's going on in Washington, and I'm not a lobbyist. I'm an advocate. I kind of call myself the Tom Sawyer of Inland. My job is to get all of our associations to paint the fence for Inland. And what I mean by that is that Mr. Goodwin recognized that to effectuate change, being engaged and very active participating members of these organizations will be able to effectuate change for the positive, because a lot of times the staff members in these organizations aren't aware of what's going on with boots on the ground. So the big organizations we're involved with is the National Association of Realtors. They're kind of like the 800-pound gorilla in Washington. U.S. Chamber of Commerce is another 800-pound gorilla. And then most of you obviously know about ADISA, IPA, the Federation of Exchange Accommodators. Those are for qualified intermediaries. They're kind of like the Jedi Council for the 1031. International Council of Shopping Centers, the 1031 is super important to them. And of course, NAREIT, the National Association of Real Estate Investment Trusts, 1031s are a major deal. So we work with all these groups. And actually, what happened during the last tax reform, we brought the groups together, and we noticed that the Republicans who were in charge of the House at the time, back in like 16, they were identifying that the 1031 would be a pay for, that they were saying that we should get rid of 1031s at the time. And that's when the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and also the presidency with Donald Trump. So one of the things that never really happened before, that because David's right, the 1031 has been it's been the tax code for 100 years, and it's been looked at to be a tax for a variety of different time periods. And I think 25 years ago, it was saved, from what I understand, by ranchers out west. And then with this tax law, and tax reform was on no one's radar screen for a long time. And then when the Republicans started working on it, and we identified that the 1031 was in trouble, Inland, along with these associations, we came together and we identified that we needed to quantify why the 1031 is good. It's kind of like saying, hey, go outside because you tell your kids that because it's good for them. Well, can you quantify that? Well, that's what we had to do. We knew 1031 was good out there, but how do we know? So the industry hired Ling and Petrova, two professors that did a microeconomic study, and then the industry and we all hired Ernst & Young, and they did a macroeconomic study. And then we had, because we're so close with the realtors, we had the National Association of Realtors do a survey of their members. And one of the reasons why the realtors are so important is because there's 1.4 million realtors. And every association, I think there's 1,300 associations, they're very engaged with politics. Every member of Congress has a realtor attached to them. And that realtor is boots on the ground in their district. What's more important to a congressperson than getting reelected, right? So they know the place to go eat in their district, the diner that people go to, the barbershop, what people are talking on the street. And usually that realtor is a personal friend of that elected official. So it's not a Republican or Democrat realtor association, it's the realtor association. So they work together in a bipartisan way. And that's what makes the realtors so powerful, because it's bringing together, somewhat liberal people, somewhat conservative people, and then joining forces on private property rights. And that is kind of an unusual thing, especially now in Washington. So when you have people being able to go into Democrat offices and Republican offices and talking the same talk, that's a really big deal. And so when I was talking before, when we were going around Capitol Hill in 2016, it was pretty cool. We had over 10,000 realtors walking Capitol Hill with us. There's no other organization that has those kind of numbers. And then you have people like the organization like the IPA. They had a guy by the name of Dan Cullen, who's from Baker McKenzie, just a brilliant mind, who were in a meeting with the tax writers, and he was able to talk more in depth about the 1031, and they were very interested in knowing more details from that meeting. ADISA, the same thing, contacting people. But then the U.S. Chamber is there to be able to give guidance, to be able to let us know what are our pitfalls, what are some of the things that the elected officials are talking about. And of course, Reits, 1031 is such a big deal. But the big thing was having these studies. So what do these studies show? So the thing that this has been an important thing to be able to identify. So the studies showed, as you can imagine, from a macroeconomic standpoint, that GDP actually would go down because the sale of commercial real estate would be at a standstill. People would lock in and not want to sell without having a 1031 there. So the idea that this was going to be some nirvana to create all of this tax revenue to pay for something was not the case. So Republicans, what did they want to pay for? They wanted to pay to bring the tax rate down from 28% to 21% for businesses. So that was a big deal. And that's obviously spurred on a lot of economic growth. But now we have the Democrats. So under candidate Biden, now President Biden, what happened is that he identified that he wants to give away free health care, free college education, and free child care. And the things that he highlighted, this campaign highlighted that they wanted to do, is to eliminate the 1031 exchange. They wanted to eliminate stepped-up basis, and they also wanted to tax capital gains at ordinary income for people that make $1 million or more. So we're back at it. The Ling Petrova have updated their study. Ernst & Young is about to update their study, and then the realtors updated their study. So the realtors, which is 90-some% commercial or residential, they identified that of all their members, that over 61% of their members have done 1031 exchanges. That's a big deal. So we're doing a lot of Zoom calls with elected officials right now, and that's one of the most important things is to educate people. And I'll be talking more about educating, because that's what we all can do. But one of the most important groups attached to the elected officials are the staff members. The staff members are usually about 22 years old and in Washington, D.C., and they're not necessarily so up to speed of what's going on with real estate. And because there's so much turnover in Washington every year of staff, and also, believe it or not, of the elected officials, once you think that everything's taken care of, then you kind of put your feet up and think it's fine. Well, during the 2016 tax reform, the Republicans passed tax reform where the 1031 was in existence for real property. It went away for personal property. So anybody that has a Monet or a Rembrandt, or you got your yacht, you're not able to do 1031s for those anymore. But you can for real property. So again, we got a good learning lesson in that experience when we were walking Capitol Hill. An actual thing that actually happened to me is I was talking, going up to an office. I knocked on the door and I said, I'm here to talk about the 1031. And the staff member looks at their watch, said, 1031? No, it's 11 o'clock. I mean, they don't really have a clue of what the 1031 is. And so we have to, it's incumbent upon us to explain it to them. So, so what are the kind of things that we're talking to elected officials about? So right now, we are recognizing that the Democrats are in charge in Washington. You do have an interesting aspect of being in charge, because during this last election, it was not thought of that the Republicans were going to win so many seats in the House. So the majority for Nancy Pelosi in the House is smaller than what everyone thought it was going to be. So that means that they have to have everybody vote the same way in order to pass something, and sometimes that can be difficult. And as we go further along in any administration, it gets more and more difficult to keep everybody together. As an example, if you remember Boehner and Speaker Paul Ryan, after a while, some of the conservative caucus members were able to disrupt things so much and bring up their own issues that in order to pass the idea of being able to pass increasing the debt rate for the United States so that the government wouldn't shut down, both Speaker Boehner and Speaker Ryan had to go to the Democrats and get votes. So people in Washington think at some point in time that nexus will happen with between conservative Democrats and liberal Democrats, and the more liberal Democrats will be able to show more of their power. So that's an interesting aspect of politics in Washington. The other thing in Washington is that the Senate race in Georgia, it was unusual, but everyone thought that the Republicans are going to win one of those Senate races, and that did not happen. So the Senate is 50-50, 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans. And because President Biden is the president, then Kamala Harris as vice president gets to cast the deciding vote. So that's why the Senate officially is run by Democrats now. And there's an age-old history of the Senate that there's a thing called the filibuster, which means you need 60 votes to be able to stop a filibuster. So essentially, you need 60 votes to pass something in the Senate. And the rules for running the Senate, they take a simple majority, but the rules with some of the conservative Democrats, they said they're not going to get rid of the filibuster. So Senator Manchin, for example, from West Virginia, said he's not going to get rid of it. So the big deal then is that how will legislation get passed? So the idea of getting rid of the 1031, I guess we don't have anything to worry about, right? Well, unfortunately, no. There is a process in Washington called reconciliation. So that happens. Reconciliation happens. It's tied to budget time. So under President Trump, he did not do an FY21 budget. So that never got passed. So it gives the Democrats a chance to be able to do reconciliation, and reconciliation only takes 51 votes in the Senate to pass it. So and it's not related to the filibuster. So the Democrats are now using the reconciliation for the COVID relief package that President Biden has put out. That's the package where 10 Republicans said in the Senate came to the president and said, we don't agree with how much money you're going to give to people and all the money you're going to spend. And then President Biden said, thank you for letting me know, but I disagree with you. So the Democrats are going on their own, and they're doing COVID relief I think it's at 1.9 trillion or something like that. And that's they're passing that, and now it's just in committees to figure out exactly how they're going to do it. But right now the 1031 is fine, so nothing's going to happen to the 1031 at this moment. So when could the 1031 be looked at? So all the people that I know in Washington believe that during tax reform under the Democrats, that will happen for FY 2022 budget, which will be in the fall. So between now and August is when we are needing everyone to understand the importance of educating elected officials about why the 1031 is so important. So the thought, kind of some of the low-hanging fruit that people in Washington think will happen, they think that you kind of take a look at what President Obama did, so under his budget. So personnel is kind of policy in Washington. So who you have in different positions is something to make sure you're aware who's in those positions. So as an example, you had President Obama saying that he wanted to bring the corporate tax rate down to 28%. So the idea is that the 21% will probably go to 28%. So that's one thing. The other thing is increasing the capital gains tax is something that President Obama wanted to do, and they think that obviously President Biden will probably do the same thing. With the 1031, President Obama wanted to say he wanted to cap 1031s at $1 million and for gain, and that could be something that they put forward. People don't necessarily think they're going to say let's just get rid of the 1031. Some people suggest they might say that if you make $400,000 or more, then you can't do a 1031. If you make less than that, then you can do a 1031. But in all actuality, it means you're probably going to get rid of the 1031 because when you make a sale, you're probably going to have $400,000 of income. So there'll be rare exceptions, but in general, that's probably the reality.
Dan, I just interrupt you real quick. That's what makes me anxious is if they put a cap on it, whether it's the $1 million or the 400. I can see the 400 being real problematic because people say, well, I just don't make 400. And as you said, it's going to be that gain thrown on top of what you make. And so it will, in effect, destroy the code. And I mean, you think about people's gains, even on homes. If you go back to 97 when we had Section 121 replace 1034 on the residential, exclude the rollover, and now it's an exclusion. Well, the 250 and 500 meant something in 97. It doesn't anymore. So yeah, these numbers all mushroom and people aren't aware of it. It feels like they're really in the mode of getting us all to fight against each other, and that's what makes me anxious, more anxious than it going away.
Yes. Yep. And so we have. I want to make sure you know what we're doing to be aware of this. So we're aware that we're looking at the fall as the time that that something could happen. So what we're doing is that we are understanding that with these meetings that we're having with elected officials, one of the most important things to remember is that we have we'll meet with the different leaders of the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. So why those committees? Well, the schoolhouse rock, how a bill becomes a law. I'm just a bill, only a bill on Capitol Hill. Well, that sucker, how it works is that the House Ways and Means Committee has a jurisdiction over tax. So they first have to decide what's going to happen with tax, and then it's sent over to the Senate Finance Committee. So those two committees are super important. And since the Democrats are in power, and President Biden has people that he's putting into Treasury, he put a lady into Treasury who doesn't like 1031s. So we have to know that the people that will be having the pen in their hand are not elected officials. The people that have the pen in the hand are staff. And so our whole purpose of these education Zooms is to really wake up the staffs that are on these calls with these elected officials to let them know the importance of how 1031 impacts our economy. And the thing that will be heartening to you is a lot of these elected officials have done 1031s. A lot of elected officials, to be an elected official, they usually have wealth. Not everyone, but a variety of them have wealth, and one of the ways that people grow their wealth is through the 1031. That's what we've highlighted throughout forever. And so the staff being on the calls, it's good for them to hear. But what will ultimately happen is that the staff in Treasury and other places and tax writing committees in the House and Senate, those staff members are going to be putting together the cake. They're going to be baking the cake of what they're going to do for reconciliation tax reform. And the thing that this is the big deal. We don't want them. We want them if they go and reach for the shaker of 1031 to put into the cake. We want everybody around them to just be like, no, you can't do that. That'd be horrible. We want to make sure that they put it back on the shelf, because this is a big deal. Once they bake the cake of tax reform, it's baked. It's kind of like a big Jenga puzzle. If that one congressman or senator says, oh, I'm going to pull that Jenga piece out and it's all going to collapse, there really is no one who loves the 1031 in Washington enough, who are elected officials, that are going to go through and stand up to the freight train of tax reform that's coming down the pike. They're not going to do that. So the big thing we have to do is to get them to never ever even want to touch on the shelf the tax reform issue of 1031. So that's the big issue. So how are we doing that? So it helps like when we meet with these elected officials, the Federation of Exchange Accommodators, and the IPA, and realtors, these wonderful studies have been so helpful. But like, we first talked to the elected officials about how much 1031s are done in their area. So in Virginia, for example, we had meetings with the senators in Virginia, and they had over $6 billion worth of 1031s last year in Virginia. And the senators were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I didn't realize it's that big a deal. It's like, yep. And so that helps to wake them up. And then we talked from a kind of a big standpoint, where some people think that 1031, this is a Donald Trump rich guy thing, and we're able to, these are just for really, big REITs and stuff like that. And NAREIT will then, with their knowledge, they're able to highlight, hey, look, REITs. Let's talk about REITs for a second. Yeah, REITs own billions of dollars worth of stuff. They might own some big buildings in Chicago, or it's New York, or whatever. But those aren't fat cats. The people that own that ultimately are a lot of pension funds. And so the police and fire, most likely in your communities, that a lot of the people that are on those pensions, they have REITs in those pension funds. And so the 1031 is used to repurpose portfolios of REITs, because it's a tool. It's another tool in the toolbox for real estate folks. Then you do have some people that say, but the 1031, no one pays taxes. They say it's tax deferral, but nobody ever pays. Well, the studies show that over 88% of 1031 deals end up in a taxable transaction. That in actuality, people don't swap till they drop. They usually stay. There's a variety of issues with paying, for boot. They pay for boot. They pay taxes for that. So 88% of 1031s actually end in a taxable event. The other aspect of the 1031, this is super important, is that they've identified that buyers renovate and owners maintain. And the big deal for that is that the 34% greater capital is invested, what they found, in 1031 exchanges. So that means there's more money to remodel. And when you do a deal, because people, if you don't have 1031, people will be locked in and they're not going to do deals. Because you have 1031, people do deals, and they're going to spend more money on those deals. So there's like 30 jobs that get created because of a 1031. So, and that generates income for the government, income tax. So you have the realtor that makes money. You have the lawyer, the appraiser, the land surveyor, all the way down the line. You can imagine how that goes. And then a very important group that we're talking to are union folks, contractors. Contractors hire for remodeling of painting, electricity, you name it. I mean, there's new roofs put on buildings. There's repurposing of what these the buildings are because of Amazon and the retail sector. There's a variety of malls that are being repurposed, and the 1031 helps the owners of malls and other places to repurpose things. Hotels being repurposed; those are a big deal. So all those aspects are important. The couple other aspects is that when we're on with these folks, again, to get to Congress, you have people who were ex-mayors, you have people that were ex-county chair people, so they know that the transfer taxes are a big deal. So if you have, with the 1031 exchange, people aren't locked into having the properties, they are actually exchanging them and deals are being done, and so you have transfer taxes that are happening. The other aspect of this is you also have property values that are growing, because how do you establish the value of your property values is through transactions, right? And that's how they keep growing those transactions, and that's impacts school districts. And again, school districts build things, and that's where unions, it's a big deal for them, so that government is able to hire them to do stuff they want to do. So it's this huge synergistic part of our economy that it's all working together. And the other aspect of this, which people don't necessarily are aware of, is that the 1031 impacts farm world. So the farm person, as you can imagine, is dirt rich and cash poor. And so farmers use the 1031 to be able to manage their portfolio of land, because that's what it is. So you have a farmer that is in the way of development. They're not going to sell their land to the developer, who's going to then build homes and hire union, so on and so forth. They're going to do all this work to put in sanitation, water, everything else. They're not going to sell because they won't be able to pay the capital gains. If they're able to defer that and then get into another piece of property, that's exactly what they do. The other aspect of this is the conservation folks. So the conservation people know that in order to do, especially this is out west, a lot of people at the farm world are paid by Birds Unlimited or some conservation group that want to buy land along the Mississippi River or water tributaries, because they want to have to take care of watersheds. They know that when water runs off the farm or off of streets, that if it filters through a marsh or something, or with natural plants, that's better for the water quality once it reaches the Mississippi or some other tributary, so it goes into the Gulf of Mexico without all the nitrates and stuff. So those are important aspects, and working with those groups are a big deal. So right now, all of our coalition is working together to, again, educate the different farm groups, educate the different conservation groups, because there's always issues for conservation and farming and everything else, and this is a big deal for farmers. And then we're waking the conservation world up again, especially the cattle farmers in out west. This stuff is a big deal to them. It's a tool in the toolbox. And then I want to highlight, and David was so helpful. Sometimes in my position, I get different groups that ask me to write, different, something to be able to explain the 1031 better in more layman's terms. And so I was able to write a blog post or whatever that says the 1031 is the 401k of real estate. And David Moore was, I should have put your name on that piece too, David, because you were really helpful. You were very helpful in giving me advice. And if you want to, David, if you want to take a second, because you had some really good thoughts about that. Why don't you? People might be tired of hearing me talk. Why don't you tell everybody why it's like the 401k of real estate?
Well, I mean, if you look at a 1031, I mean, it is in effect a Roth IRA. I mean, you're talking tax money growing, but tax deferred. But at the end of the day, you don't get the tax-free treatment. You're going to have it if you don't do the stepped-up basis. But the idea is that Wall Street, and it's interesting to me because yesterday somebody on this call had reposted the presentation, and somebody was immediately attacking them on 1031 and what it's there for. And I just think that there's so much information out there, misinformation out there. We're talking about the amount of money in Wall Street that's qualified money, IRA 401k funds. And the number our staff came up with recently was roughly 30 trillion. And there's only a couple percent of that money that's in real estate, and that's probably in Reits. So when you start looking at elimination of things, if you eliminate 1031, obviously it's very, very destructive to real property transactions. And Wall Street said, well, gee, we don't have it. Well, I would argue, and coming from a guy that's in the IRA 401k world too, I'm not trying to just feather my own nest. I mean, I've got both sides of it here. But the way I look at retirement accounts and 1031s, I just look at it as the same sort of treatment, IRA 401k for real estate. And the reality is it's not for the 1%ers, Dan. You and I have spoken many times about this. Great thing about a 1031 exchange is that, for $1,000 you can have an exchange structured. If you've got, it's probably the one tax deferral instrument that anybody can use at a reasonable cost. What's a good lawyer cost an hour to do anything else? I mean, so it's a great thing for the average person. Your comments on the farm situation is, I think, we've had modifications proposed in the late 90s. We had a proposal that would have, obviously the timelines in 1031 is a big issue, and there was a proposal that would have eliminated the 45 days, but it would have made a 1031 a not similar in service or use, but a true like kind definition. And the ag world was sort of left out, because you think about those people, their whole life, they're land rich, cash poor. And if they weren't able to get out, they were looking at excluding the farm world from that deferral because of the concern about it being taken out of work. And at that point in time, we had lots of hunters buying up stuff, but it would have just stuck those people, the farmers in that farm property. So we're looking at these things. You can argue Wall Street looks at it differently than we do in the real property world. But as you said, Wall Street should be concerned just from these other things that they're working with in that real estate world. But it's something that people don't really think of. But like I said, with a 1031, it's tax deferred, it's not tax free, and the only way you're going to get rid of it is the elimination of the stepped up basis. We did get some questions on that we'll address at the end, but I'll get out of the way, Dan, and let you finish up.
Hey, David, it's terrific being your partner in this stuff. Your partner in crime. You are great to work with. And the other aspect of retirement, Mr. Goodwin and the inland world. Like I said, they were seeing that ticks were a way to go, but they became clunky, as you all know, because you have the rogue investor, where you have to have everybody all agree to vote a certain way, and you only have a small amount of investors that can go into it. So the DST has been a terrific opportunity for people to be able to take their passive or their active investment and turn it into passive for retirement. And so that's a big deal for farmers. It's really opened up a whole new world for people. So we're excited to be the leaders of the DST industry, and we're very much grateful for all the organizations that we're a part of. So the Real Estate Roundtable is kind of like the Knights of the Round Table, with all the different groups I talked about, and they also include more like the Mortgage Bankers Association, the lodging, hotel industry, the Commercial Real Estate Finance Council, lots of groups. But I can't overemphasize how NAR has been such a leader for us, and working with them has been such an important aspect of all of this. So the realtor, I'm proud to wear my realtor pen. And I have, I'm an RPAC donor and involved in all these different PACs, actually, with all of our associations, the Federation Exchange Accommodators, everybody. And one of the things that I would ask now is for everybody in the room, I would say, raise your hand if you know your elected official, your congressman, your federal elected officials, your senators or congressmen. So the reason why I say that is because it really is true. In our democracy, you really have to get engaged and get off the sidelines. And one of the best things you all can do is go to www.1031.org. That's www.1031.org. That brings you to the Federation of Exchange Accommodators website, and go to the advocacy section of it, and it will have all the white papers on the studies I talked about. There'll be talking points, and there'll be a way you can type in your name, and it'll show you who your congressman is or congresswoman, your senators are, and you'll call their office. And so you got one congressperson and two senators, right? So it behooves you to call those offices. You probably won't get a hold of the elected official. You can ask for them, but if you could talk to the staff person in charge of tax, and then no matter what, because some people say to me, "Oh my gosh, Dan, these folks are, they're just, I know they're going to be against it." Well, then it's important that you help create cognitive dissonance for them. Even if they're not on your side, it's still important that you call them and let them know, because it will make them think twice before doing something to it. So, the thing now that usually comes up is, Dan, let's say worst case scenario, they get rid of the 1031. What does that mean to us? Like, what would be the quickest, if they get rid of the 1031 in the fall? What does that mean? So, the idea of clawing back or going back to January of 2021 is, while it might be legal, all of the people who are in our associations, like Evan Lydiard, for example, he's worked for Orrin Hatch for like 20 years. He works now for NAR. A lot of different people like him with lots of experience highlight that because of politics, they're never going to, if they eliminate the 1031, they're never going to bring it back to January 1st of 2021. They would, if they do eliminate it, it would begin effective January 1st of 2022. So then people say, well, what's your advice about doing 1031? Well, my advice, honestly, is if I had a client that had a possibility of wanting to sell their property that's income producing, I would suggest this is probably a good time to do it, just to be on the safe side. I don't believe the 1031 is going to go away. I think that our coalition will be successful working with all of the different groups that I highlighted, with the farmers and conservation folks and everybody. I think we'll be successful. But if you're looking for the possibility, if it does go away, that's what I think could happen, is it would be January 1st of 2022. So I don't think it's going to it will go away. I think that we're all coming together and we're going to educate. I mean, there were times during the last tax reform with the Republicans in charge, there were a variety of times where I'd have colleagues like, oh, I know it's going to go away. I know it's going to go away. And, you just like, no, Dan Goodwin at Inland, we're going to the mattresses. We're not going to stop this fight until it's over with. And then we're going to keep monitoring it for the rest of our lives. This is what Inland is committed to, and that's why I exist. So I have 4 kids, and this gives me something to do. So I always have to be out and about learning about this stuff. But David, I guess probably what's the questions, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, so today's presentation is all about keeping Dan's job in place. So
that's right.
I just want to stress, so I'll give the questions, but as far as, why you guys are here, I mean, Inland, we work with you guys day in, day out. You got about 60% of that DST market, but you guys had an audience with people at the top, right? And you were talking, when we were talking about the presentation, we did this for another group a while back. But the idea was you guys have had the direct conversations there, but as far as sort of the pressure to get things done, we talked about midterm elections and all that. I know you've sort of brushed against that during the presentation, but I don't know if you want to elaborate just a little bit more on why we've got you, why we should be listening to what you've got to say, and you've got a great message.
So, David, that's a really good point that I should have brought up. Thanks for reminding me. So, in 2022 is where the elections happen again for Congress, and because the Republicans have now reduced the majority Democrats to like 4 or 5 seats, the thought is that because the party that's in power, the Democrats, statistically over the years, the party that's in power loses seats. So if people in Las Vegas right now are betting that Kevin McCarthy is going to become speaker in 2 years, so people believe that will happen. In regards to the Senate is going to be tougher for Republicans because there's going to be so many open seats. You have a variety of people from Pennsylvania, from North Carolina, from Ohio that are, Portland, longstanding people are going to retire, and those are in some of the battleground states that are closer. So that'll be a big deal. And then obviously the Georgia seat is going to come open with Warnock. So those are some big deals. With all the amount of senators that are up, it's not impossible for the Republicans to win, but it's going to be harder. So the thought process is that the House would become Republican. There are some people that suggest, because politics is the art of the possible, that possibly the reconciliation bill would not actually go through for this fall, that they would wait until after the elections. And the Democrats would hope to have more seats in the House and Senate, that they would be able to be more free to do what they wanted, to pass whatever they wanted. So so there could be a possibility that reconciliation, maybe they won't do it, but everybody in Washington says that there's a 30% chance that they won't do reconciliation. There's a, so 70+% they're going to do reconciliation. But that thought process of politics is always out in Washington, and the art of the possible is a big deal, as you all know.
Thank you. So we do have a few questions. First one, what's more likely to be repealed, stepped up basis or 1031 exchange? If step up is repealed, is there a reason to ever repeal the 1031 exchange?
That's a great question. So the power of lobbying, of advocacy, I guess, is going to be what my mind goes to. So if you get rid of the stepped up basis, the family farm probably goes away, because the farmer would, when they die, they're going to leave their kids their farm. The kids won't be able to pay the millions of dollars of taxes. So, the stepped up basis is going to be difficult to go away. So if it was between the two, I think stepped up basis stays and 1031 would go if it's between the two. If the stepped up basis goes and the 1031 stays, I still think the 1031 is still a valuable tool, because you're able to defer, like David talked about. It's like 401k real estate. So I still think it's a very valuable tool.
So it's interesting, we talked about it. I would say that we have opportunity zones because we lost personal property transactions. So they modified the code, but they gave you something else. And I don't know what they'd give you if they got rid of 1031 the balance of the way, but that sort of dovetails in. We had a question, what would happen to the real estate industry if there were no 1031 real estate transactions? Would the velocity of deals slow down?
The answer to that is yes, and that's where if you go to that website that I told you, when you look at the Ernst & Young study, that's the macroeconomic study, it actually quantifies how it slows down. So yes, it'd be awful. And you brought up, I didn't mention opportunity zones, and another thing I forgot. So what's going to happen to opportunity zones? Well, the good news is that President Biden is for opportunity zones. He thinks they're good for economic development. The very liberal part of the Democrat Party, AOC, has highlighted that she wants to get rid of them, but they're here to stay because the president is for them. The thought, though, they will change probably. So like in Chicago here, the aldermen and alderwomen are in charge of their universe for zoning. And so if we build an apartment building in some ward, you have that alderman or woman usually says, hey, I want 10 or 15% of these apartments need to be affordable, which reduces the amount of how much you're able to make on it. And then, or they might say, I want a new park across the street. So the idea is that for opportunity zones, they're going to be probably more tied to nonprofits than ever before. And they with the census track, they're going to move them into probably more areas that are economically challenged. So one of the raps on the opportunity zones is that some of them haven't been perceived to be in economically challenged areas. So they want to try to deal with that. So those are some of the changes they're going to look at.
So Dan, I got a comment there. Just your statement: buyers renovate, owners maintain, and the question on the market velocity came from a gentleman that has a very large property management company too. And I guess I would sort of put it out there that the problem with that lack of liquidity or market velocity that what I believe would occur with 1031's removal is that in markets such as ours, we've got so much in the way of tenant rights. The owners have no rights. The ability, so new buildings are exempted from some of the laws. If a building's 15 years or older, it's got certain things that the owners can't do as far as bumping rents, renovation, all that stuff. And I could see where, just with your statement, buyers renovate, owners maintain, you're in a world where these old buildings are just going to get older and older and older if we don't have the ability to turn them and bring in some new energy, new buyers with new energy and new capital to make them work again. That's a real concern I've got. Now, I just see it. I mean, the people that are buying, as you said, every transaction you've got everywhere, everyone from Home Depot to, inspectors to, the finance people, and so many people that are gaining revenue and paying income tax, that dramatic decrease in market velocity would be devastating if you really looked at it. And back in that number you gave us on the percentage of real estate brokers that use it, going back 30 years, we had gone through numbers and we found that up to 64% of the properties on the market could or should be exchanged. Now I'll put it out to the people on the call, and we've got about 150 of you out there right now. How many of you are working out of your home these days, and come tax return time this last year, your tax person was saying, gee, you're working out of your home, you ought to treat that home office as a home office. Well, what have you done? Now you've got a single asset with allocations two different directions. If that home office is treated as such for more than 3 out of the last 5 years, and you sell your home, you're going to have a tax hit if 1031 doesn't exist. So that's one of those situations where, I've been doing this 30 years. The number of people that get stung on a home office not doing the exchange is very, very small, but it is something that could happen. So
that's a great point. I'm writing that down, David. I didn't think about that. That is a great point. Yeah. I got to add that to our.
Thank you. So we got another question. What do we expect will happen to people in the existing 1031 deals? And I think you answered that question already. You said no clawbacks, at least at this point. But I would agree with you. We're very busy right now. I think there's lots of people out there trying to get deals done just in case, right? So
absolutely. I think that's what I would recommend, is to get them done. While it could be clawed back, all of the people who are in Washington say that would not happen. It would be January 1st of 2022. So you're good to go.
Okay, I've got a question here. Can your association create a form letter that we can use to mail our House and Senate representatives? I believe our Save 1031, the FEA site, has that already, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just click a couple buttons. But the big deal is to make a phone call too. That's going to be a more powerful thing.
Got it. Yeah. And you're funny to say that. I can get to the bottom line on a phone call in a couple minutes. We're trading. Nobody wants to talk anymore. They want to text or email. It drives me crazy. All right. I've got a gentleman that asks, I assume Inland requires investors to be accredited. What are the current requirements to qualify?
Well, accredited investor, if you're you have a net worth of $5 million besides your home is a way. If you have, they just changed it. If you have 250,000 as an individual or 300,000 as a couple, but the thing they changed is if you have like a CPA or PhD or some other aspect, that's something that's open now. So that aspect is, there's a couple different other licenses you might be able to have that make you accredited, but really the 250, 300, the income level is for sure you can feel comfortable.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Next question. To what extent is Inland seeing growing demand for OZs? Actually, QOZ investments or alternatives to doing 1031 exchange. I know I'm expressing to you the desire to see some more UPREIT type situations, but you want to address that. So to what extent is Inland seeing growing demand for QOZ investments or an alternative doing a 1031 exchange?
Yeah, so we have, we're growing in the QOZ area, and it's been interesting. Some of these QOZs that when we put them out there, they just get sold out so quickly. We can't keep them on the shelves. So people are using the opportunity zones for obviously the capital gains for the sale of other things besides real property. For real property, the DST people believe is still the best bet, but that depends on your CPA working with your financial advisor. But that's kind of what is out there. And the other aspect of Inland is that our Rod Curtis area, he's getting more and more into mobile home parks. And that's something that we're looking at, which is something different. So it's a different type of investment altogether. So, but the DST brings up a good question. Some people said, so, what happens with the DST? Well, if the 1031 goes away, well, if somebody goes into a DST still continues. The question is that what happens when the DST is done? So people will still continue to get their, if everything works, get their income and everything. But the 1031 still is the deferral, and so we would, if the DSTs have the clause in them that they can go to a springing LLC. But you're right, David, you can do an UPREIT. So Inland's been in business for 50 some years. We take care of our investors, that, and we have really smart folks that have been running the show. They're always working to have contingency plans. But again, we're going to save the 1031.
So just one other comment on the DSTs. I was at a presentation actually. One of my 1031 competitors was doing, and you guys were speaking too, and the question came up, and the speaker was incorrect, talking about whether IRA 401k funds could buy into the DST too. So obviously DSTs are going to be damaged if 1031 goes away, but there's still many reasons for you to put money into them. I mean, why put money in the bank these days? You don't get paid anything, but if you want something where you're getting a check in the mail, and you still have, unlike a REIT, you still got the benefit, it's treated like real property, right? I mean, you've got that cash flow and different things happen on instead of just a stock. So I obviously it would hurt us all, but it wouldn't mean you guys are history in that stuff by any means.
And you have depreciation that gets passed through too, which is a benefit to some folks as well. Yeah. And they act as debt sponges for people as well. So,
yeah. So next question: if 1031s were to go away, actually, one of the last, I just want to hit real quick on the opportunity zone stuff. Just be aware, everybody out there, you're not typically going to be blending 1031 or QOZs, but understand you only have 180 days to get the QOZ too. In a tightening market, if we go back, 20, 30 years in 1031, if somebody wanted to terminate an exchange, we just give them their money and figure, hey, the government's happy you're paying the tax. But there's been rulings since where we have to follow, anybody in the exchange world that does this full time is going to follow the 1031 G6 rules, which means that you can't get funds out of the transaction until you've purchased everything you have the right to buy. So if you start an exchange and you sort of think about the fact you might want to go into OZ, you got to understand that 45th day is critical. You're either going to sink the exchange at that point if you've turned in an ID, rescind the ID, or just don't turn it in, because if you've turned in an identification and it's now day 60 and you want to go into the QOZ, we're not going to be able to give you your money. So make sure anybody out there, if you're in an exchange, more importantly than ever before, that 45 days critical. Don't just name a property as a fallback, because you're going to be stuck with us until day 181. So understand that 45 days is hard, but after that, it's dependent. The 1031 G6 rules basically say you can't receive funds until you've purchased everything you have the right to buy. Make sure you understand what you have the right to buy and when you have to do that.
You know your stuff, David.
Yeah. Next question: if 1031s go away, 122, would both legs of 1031 need to be completed by 12/31/21?
I believe that's the case. Everything would have to be taken care of by then, don't you, David?
I haven't, honestly, I was just reading a question. I haven't been tracking it well enough to understand what they do with that. So as far as clawbacks, I think it'd be very tough. I mean, you look at like the California or Oregon, where you've got Oregon came up with it, where basically they were discriminating between residents and non-residents with 1031 treatment, and the Oregon State Constitution prohibited that. So they sort of overturned it, and they at one point decided that all exchanges were going to be taxable if they left the state, and then they saw the error in their ways and turned it over. So now they've got that clawback feature as far as you can exchange out of the state, but you're going to pay the state tax if there's ever a future taxable sale. And then California saw that happen and said, hey, we're going to do that. We're going to finance enforcement of it. So they've done that. So you've got that clawback provision in there. I don't, as far as federal clawbacks on this stuff, I don't know. I mean, I guess they can ask for what they're going to ask for.
And the big thing with your takeaway, I think, for everybody is to recognize that you are a professional in this industry and you have had incredible experiences. You need to make sure your elected official knows what your experiences have been and tell them those wonderful stories that you have, all of you have, where you've seen how the 1031 has impacted real people. And that's going to be the thing that's going to save it, is having elected officials understand this isn't for fat cats, that this is for the average person. I think that's a big deal.
And that's a great point, Dan. I've got clients that are immigrants that came here with absolutely nothing. And one guy's story, he came in and worked as a janitor, and now he's done very well. I won't give out numbers, but I mean, the guy's a tremendous success, and he's got great family, doing great things, and it started with literally nothing. So
right.
Here's another question. What was the exchange website that has the white papers?
www.1031.org.
Got it. And then are there any changes in the rules for the reverse 1031? No, we really haven't had any changes on that. You've got, we got the final guidelines for reverses in 2000, so it hasn't changed much. And the big issue with reverses, obviously, is just if you're needing financing, where you're going to get it, and it's going to need to be a regional source portfolio lender if we're doing what's called a warehouse replacement. But yeah, the financing's critical. What I tell people is use the reverse as a fallback. Don't use it as a primary, just because the costs, not just our costs, but any potential additional costs with the exchange. All right, and actually, I've got Jeff. You've been a busy boy on this, so I've got a URL for a website on small office, home office, and deductions. So, but anyway, we've got that. We can get it out to people. I don't believe we've got any more questions at this point. So I want to just thank you.
I put on a tie for you.
What was that, Dan?
I put on a tie for you today. So
yeah, I really appreciate it. Look at that time. It's been an hour. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming online. By the way, on the opportunity zones, we've got a whole series of videos on that. Actually, somebody that was on the call, a real estate lawyer, Connie Rathbone, was involved with those, and she's done a lot of work in that space. So if you've got questions on qualified opportunity zones, take a look at those videos on our YouTube. Just type in 1031exchange.com equity advantage opportunity zone. It should come up. And if you've got questions, anything else we've addressed today, don't hesitate to reach out. Dan, are we going to be able to distribute a copy of your slides here?
I believe we will be able to do that. Let me verify that with our.
Okay. Great. And then we did get the green light to have the video of this put up, so people have missed it, or if you want to watch it again, feel free. You'll be able to watch that on our YouTube channels as well. But once again, David Moore with Equity Advantage, 1031exchange.com. Blessed to have Dan Wagner of Inland Private Capital, and we will be making updates on this, Dan, as things happen. You'll be getting word out, and if something significant, if it does happen, we'll be getting you back. Any other last words you'd like to offer at this moment, Dan?
I'm blessed to call David Moore my friend.
Yeah. Well, and ditto. I love the Inland family. So thank you. Great job today. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And if you've got questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And best health to everyone out there. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye, everybody.